opportunity Saturday. Some of you may have seen the little commercial that we did down in Tombstone. Well, 2 people did. That's 3 people. 50% improved in just a matter of seconds. Anyway, Christopher was kind enough to join me down there. We conducted an interview, which in essence was a commercial or a plea on behalf of the cold case posse. I'm from Houston originally. I used to have a Texas accent, but over the last 4 days, my accent's changing very quickly. I'm not sure how to speak anymore. In any case, the more I'm around him, the more my shtick, my country boy accent seems to disintegrate. So it's a bloody thing after all. In any case, we went to Tombstone. It just happened to be Wyatt Earp days. And the reason we did that is that my book, O'Reilly O'Reilly, has been, it was released actually some months ago, and it's been split into 2 parts, Part 1 and Part 2. Part 1 is available at my website, which is named after my previous second book, which is uncommonSenseNow.com. And I have a few cards left, but anyway, if you can remember that, uncommonSenseNow.com. And Part 1 of O'Reilly is available there. Part 2, which is the reason I'm mentioning this, is will be released in another week or so. And the reason that I'm updating it is to include not only the recent court cases in Georgia primarily and New Jersey, there's another very important one pending in Alabama, which I may also have to add, but the final chapter is on the cold case posse, and it is entitled One Bad Hombre, America's Last Best Hope, Another Lawman from Arizona. And of course, I'm referring to the much loved and much maligned, unfortunately, Sheriff Joe Arpaio of Maricopa County, Arizona. And of course, I'm comparing him in that chapter to the most celebrated sheriff in American history, none other than Arizona lawman, U.S. Marshal Wyatt Earp. And I think that's a very appropriate comparison because Sheriff Arpaio, like his previous counterpart, is a very fearless man. And as Lord Longton will tell you, he is a man of great accomplishment in the law enforcement community, many years of experience in both federal law enforcement as well as in his role as the Maricopa County Sheriff. So Lord Monckton was kind enough to go down there with me, and we in fact did an interview a stone's throw, if you will, from the OK Corral where the famous showdown took place. And I compare that showdown on Wednesday afternoon at 3 o'clock on the 26th of October, 1881, to that which is looming on the Sonoran Desert horizon even as we speak, the showdown between Sheriff Joe Arpaio and his cold case posse, headed by the Earp lookalike Mike Zullo, which is mustache, good lips. The showdown between them and the sitting president of the United States. The only difference is the stakes in this case are much higher than they were that day at the OK Corral. But I'm confident that the truth will prevail. We were a few minutes late getting here because Gary, or as I like to call him, W. This is Gary McConaughey. Gary is Lord Monckton's facilitator, shall we say, and has arranged to bring him here to us. So he's GL, and Gary Wilmot is GW, or just W for those of us from Texas. He's a bit more conservative than his counterpart, the former President George W. Bush. But nonetheless, I'm very thrilled to be here. I'm going to talk about my book, but I'm not going to spend a lot of time quoting chapter and verse. I will tell you the theme, and the theme is that while I did not start out to write this book on the eligibility of the President, it was one of the topics that I wanted to take up with William James O'Reilly, Jr. You know him as Bill O'Reilly. it was one of the themes. There were 3 or 4, and but as soon as I got into that issue, and it's not unlike Christopher's own story with regard to the cold case posse, as soon as he heard it, he immediately, being a rather bright individual, saw that there was something here that was, as he would say, irregular. And indeed, it is irregular. So when I was watching the O'Reilly program, the No Spin Zone, and watching him spin mightily on the evening of February the 14th, 2011, just happened to be Valentine's Day, so I can remember that. He absurdly said that with regard to either the religion or the birthplace of the President of the United States, it would have, this is almost a direct quote, no bearing on any national policy. Now, I don't know how many of you have seen the cartoon of the old country boy sitting there on his couch with his wife beater on and shotgun, and the television screen decimated on the wall. But that almost happened that night, except that I didn't have a shotgun. Nonetheless, I cried out, "You can't be serious." And actually my exact words were, "Oh, really?" Now, there is no religious test in the Constitution. A Muslim could, in fact, be elected to any office in the country.
I think he has.
Well, as a matter of fact, we already have. Well, excuse me. An openly, you know, avowed or stated Muslim. But, and there's a Muslim congressman. But it would be highly unlikely that in the instance in which we are at war with radical Islam, that would take place. And so for O'Reilly to suggest or to state emphatically that it would have no bearing on any national policy was, in fact, outrageous. And then he went on to say it would not matter where he was born. And my immediate response, besides saying, "Oh, really?" was to say, if you have a problem with Article 2, Section 1 of the Constitution, Clause 5, take that up with John Jay. He's the one that saw to it, via George Washington, Alexander Hamilton, and James Madison, if you recognize those names. Jay was the first person to suggest that requirement to George Washington, who not only was the subsequent first President of the United States, and also formerly first Commander-in-Chief, but as you all know, the President of the Congressional or the Constitutional Convention. So John Jay, in a letter to George Washington on July the 25th, 1787, suggested to General Washington, or President Washington at the time, that it might be advisable, I don't remember his exact words, to require that the President, not the President, but the Commander-in-Chief of the U.S. Armed Forces, is the way he put it, be a natural-born citizen. So my response to O'Reilly was, don't take it up with any of us, take it up with those that wrote the Constitution and put that requirement in there. Because if the Constitution, as the supreme law of the land, can be ignored capriciously or at will, then in fact it means nothing. We no longer have what is known as the rule of law. The rule of law in our country, at least, is based on, one, the fact that we do have a written constitution that is the supreme law of the land. Number two, that all people are equal before the law. And three, no one, this is the corollary to number two, no one is above the law. And yet we have a clear instance where the current occupant of 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue, the People's House, quite frankly, is in fact above the law. And we've seen that in every case that we've seen around the country. And of course, the citizens of the country, the people of the country, are considered to have no standing. Now that, frankly, is outrageous. And that is, in fact, a complete defiance to the rule of law and to our tradition of government of the people, by the people, and for the people. We are, according to Thomas Jefferson, the people are the ultimate authority, and according to Abraham Lincoln as well. And both the courts and the legislature are answerable to the people, and that's us. Now, I have to tell you that I for one, am very optimistic about the future of our country. I have no delusion that it will be smooth sailing, but I am very confident. I'm confident for one simple reason, well, really two reasons. And I'll put these in order. one is God, and I believe that He, in fact, raised up this nation and raised up the inspired men who wrote the Constitution, the greatest liberating document, governing document in the history of the world, and we can prove that by our own 200-some-odd-year history of freedom and prosperity. But two, I'm confident because of the people in this room. Now you might think that you're a relatively small group, and you are. As you know, Samuel Adams says it does not take a majority but an irate minority willing to set brush fires in people's minds. And that's what we're doing, and that's what I want to encourage you to do tonight. We were, as W suggested, fashionably late. I'm usually late, but it's not fashionably late, I'm just not on time. He wanted to take Lord Monckton and me to the memorial at the Reagan Library, the gravesite. And so we had the privilege of going there, and to me it was a hallowed place. And so we were there, and on the inscription on the wall, I don't remember all of it. Lord Monckton probably can quote it verbatim. He's got a rather good memory. But it did say that in the end, or eventually, truth would prevail. Something to the effect that we all need to stand for truth, which was precisely what I am constantly encouraging people to do. Now, someone asked me a minute ago in the audience, why did I think that Bill O'Reilly was not willing to broach this subject? And frankly, if that's all that was his crime, I would probably let him off the hook. The bigger crime of both O'Reilly, and let me go ahead and refer to my notes here briefly. O'Reilly and a number of others, you'll notice that most of these that I'm going to read, in fact, work for Fox News. And this is Brother Bill, if you will, here, posing as Abraham Lincoln. And that is his boss, Rupert Murdoch, and he's a very good likeness of Teddy Roosevelt, with spectacles and all. So those are the two cover boys of my book, but they are not alone. In the book, I want to make this clear. I am a registered independent. Actually, at the moment, I'm registered as a Republican because I wanted to vote in the presidential primary, which in Arizona, if you register as an independent, you can vote in either primary, with the exception of the presidential primary. I'm not sure the logic, but that's politics. I'm sure it was some kind of compromise. So I re-registered as a Republican so that I could vote in the primary, and I'll probably re-register as an independent. Don't be too aghast by that, but I am not impressed at this point by what this Congress that we elected with a landslide majority in terms of the turnover in 2010. I'm not impressed with what they have done. And I'm not afraid to say it, and I appreciate you guys agreeing with that. So let me talk about those on the right. I don't waste a lot of time worrying about Media Matters or Politico or the Huffington Post. I could care less what they have to say, and I already know what they're going to say, and so does everyone in the room. If I were to name any topic, whether it would be the Second Amendment, immigration, birth control, abortion, traditional marriage, you all know exactly where you would have to fall to be in alignment with those entities, and also where you would not, in fact, want to fall because you're here tonight. So we all know what they have to say, and I really don't expect them to do otherwise, and I really don't care. I do have a problem, though, when those who purport to be conservatives and defenders of the Constitution will not stand up for it just because it's not popular or politically correct. Truth has no interest whatsoever in, as Lord Monckton will address, in consensus. There was a time, this is somewhat trite but true, that the entire world, or most of it at least, believed that the world, the earth, was flat. It did not change the fact that it was not flat. Truth has no interest whatsoever in opinions. Truth is, it simply is, and it's eternal. The law of gravity doesn't care whether we believe it or not. If you step off of a building, you are going to fall. It's the law, and it's eternal, and it's true. At least it's eternal on this, within this sphere as we know it today. So, getting to my list on the those on the right in the national media. And again, I'm sure I've left many of these out, and I will tell you frankly, there are a few on this list that I'm not absolutely certain where they stand on this issue of the eligibility, because it's more what will appear to be clear ineligibility. But the very fact that I don't know tells me perhaps all I need to know, because I'm very focused on this issue. We all know there are a lot of issues out there, and we can't be dealing in all of them, and I'm interested in all of them, but I've decided to sort of focus on this one at this point in time. And it is very relevant, because when you have someone who would appear to be, and I say this because I'm giving him the benefit of the doubt, that no one could be so unintelligent as to take the actions that he's taken, other than the fact that they have to be intentional. And we understand that his boss, if you will, is a man who has made his billions by bringing down world or national economies and destroying currencies, then it all suddenly makes perfect sense. So I believe, in fact, that this is not an accident, and here are some of the names of those that seem to be covering for him on the right. William James O'Reilly Jr., Laura Ingraham. I love most of these people and have admired them greatly, but on this issue they will not speak up. And not only will they not speak up, but like O'Reilly, they mercilessly mock any who will. Ask Lord Monckton what it's like to be mocked. And you are the lone voice out there, or the most prominent one on the planet, standing up against obvious falsehood, the myth of global warming. And the entire establishment media of the entire planet is mocking you 24/7. Fortunately for us in the world, he doesn't care. So, Laura Ingraham, Sean Hannity, Glenn Beck. I used to be Glenn's #1 fan. I'm not saying Glenn's an evil man, but he's absolutely advocated on this issue. Ann Coulter, Michelle Malkin. These are usually very feisty females that we all love and respect. Mark Levin, ditto that, except that he's a male. Carl Rove, he was never a conservative. Brett Baer, Britt Hume, Shep Smith, Neil Cavuto, Greta Van Susteren, Charles Krauthammer, Fred Barnes, Mort Kondracki, Bill Crystal, The Weekly Standard, Jonah Goldberg, National Review Online, George Will, Neil Bortz, Hugh Hewitt, Mike Reagan, and this is one of my more sad commentaries, Dennis Prager. Does anyone know if Dennis has spoken out on this issue? Once again, if he had, I think I would know about it, and we would know about it, but I'm very disappointed in Dennis for that. Political correctness has no bearing on truth, as we said. Walter Williams, one of my also favorite people on the planet, and I've communicated with Walter personally, and he's basically sort of distanced himself from the issue. Him of all people, I'm disappointed. Mike Gallagher, Dennis Miller, Lucianne Goldberg, Michael Medved, the editors of Red State, Breitbart.com, and even, and I even hate to say this, maybe someone will correct me if I'm wrong, I still love the man dearly, but David Barton, perhaps one of our greatest patriots and defenders of the Constitution, and yet I have not seen him speak out, and I actually approached him on the issue, at least to his people, shall we say, and he was not interested, so I'm disappointed in that. Now here's there are more in Arizona, but I won't bore you with that. Those that have spoken out, and again, there are others. The two titans, if you will, on the internet were Joseph Farah, have been, continue to be, WorldNet Daily, WND, and then his buddy, co-founder of the Western Center for Journalism, Floyd Brown. They have been champions of this issue from day one on the internet, the new media as I call it, and frankly more relevant than the old media. And then in addition to that, Alex Jones has really taken up the mantle on this. Alex is a little out there in some issues, and I'm sure some people probably take exception to some of his positions, but he has been fearless on this issue, and I am appreciative of that. Eric Bolling at Fox News, I don't know how he did not get the memo. He's at Fox Business News, and so maybe that gives him a pass. I never heard Judge Napolitano address it directly. I suspect that he would be willing to, but guess what? He's no longer at Fox News, and so Lou Dobbs was willing to address this when he was at CNN. He did get the memo when he got to Fox News, and other than his first interview with Bill O'Reilly, in which he was mocked for his absurd position, It wasn't quite that bad. Bill was respectful of him, but did say, do you really want to be associated with that? Other than that, he has never mentioned it. Until recently, he has in fact suggested that the cold case posse just may be on to something. So the bottom line, as you can see, is that the vast majority of the prominent national conservative media have advocated on this issue. And I used to call it MIA, but that would in fact suggest that they were only missing, perhaps of no volition of their own, but I now call it AWOL, absent without leave, which means they have abandoned their fellow soldiers in the middle of battle. And we are at war here for the soul of our country, for the Constitution, and it is no time to be either MIA or AWOL in this case. So, I've probably taken enough time from Lord Monckton, and I know you've come here to hear him, and so I won't take much more time, but I want to encourage everyone to understand that while we can't control what other people do on this issue, and by the way, do not waste your time or energy or emotional energy waiting for Arian Huffington or any of those people in the so-called mainstream media. Don't waste your time. They're not going to come around to it until it's absolutely been proven and he's removed from office. And then we don't know exactly how they'll try to save face, but they will not be able to. And that'll be a glorious day. I'm sure you'll all agree. Dietrich Bonhoeffer said, and I'll end with this, said that evil or silence in the face of evil is itself evil. Not to act is to act, not to speak is to speak. Each of us has a voice. Each of us has an email list. Some of those lists are long, others perhaps not. But when we forward emails that are informative and hopefully rational and reasonable, there's a lot of things we get that certainly are not. But when we forward emails that are informative and we believe to be true, and we've done our own homework, and we add our little testimony, if you will, to them, then we have just stood up. And many people will say, well, some of my friends are liberal. Well, send them anyway. They'll tell you if they don't want to receive them. I know that for sure. I haven't, frankly, had many people that have told me not to email. Several members of my family have, but I'm okay with that. I knew that going in. So, not to speak is to speak, and not to act is to act. I pray that each of us will, in fact, have the courage to simply say the truth. Joe Arpaio has uncovered much truth. It's out there. It's available on the internet. Anybody who wants to know knows, in fact, that while we still don't know where he was born, we do know that there is, at the very least, reasonable cause to suspect that it wasn't here in the United States. And I thank you and encourage you to continue to speak the truth and to not shy away from doing that, no matter what the political or popularity cost may be. Thank you, and God bless America.